Hello, friends, and welcome to a special Chabura public shiur. Tonight we have with us for the first time Rabbi Josh Berdugo, and together we'll be exploring the legacy of Rabbi David HaNagid, the grandson of the Rambam. It is a privilege to have Rabbi Berdugo here with us, and personally, it's an honor to be able to introduce my good friend Josh and fellow Miamian. With that, thank you so much, everyone, for being here live, especially with the date change and clock change and date change again. Thank you all who will be here, who will be listening afterwards. Josh, thank you so much for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ohad. Always a pleasure to see you, my friend. I apologize. It was my fault for the time switches. I'm actually in New Jersey right now, even though I'm a fellow Miamian type of guy, but I had a lot of meetings and I had to attend, so I apologize. I'm actually in. For those of you who don't know, I'll just give a brief introduction about myself. My name is Josh Berdugo. My brother is Yitzhak Berdugo, Rabbi Yitzhak Berdugo. He comes on the Chabur a lot. We're different, so I'm not, trying to compete with him or anything. Not that it's a competition, but it's an honor and a privilege to be part of the Chabura. I'm a huge fan from the outset of it. It's really holy stuff. I studied in Rabbi Zweig's yeshiva for around 3 years, and then I switched over to Yitzhak Elfan Seminary. I apologize. I'm in actually the mall right now, so if there's any like background music or anything, I'm so sorry. So I switched over to Rabbi Yitzhak Elchanan's for REITs, and I got my smicha under Rabbi Eliyahu Ben Chaim, and I studied under them, and then also with the chief rabbi of Montreal, Rabbi David Sabah. And so it's always been when I started off my journey. I don't know if my brother like gave his story before on this on the Chabur or not, but I guess I'll briefly, if he did, forgive me. If not, I'll just quickly go over it. So we were Bala Tshuva. I'm a Bala Tshuva. I was not always religious. I didn't actually know how to read Hebrew or anything by the time of a bar mitzvah. I had to kind of like skip over everything. I was actually such a bad student that I had to read under in my Haftarah. I had to read it transliterate. So nobody knew. I would hold my, the Sefer Haftarah, and I would just actually put like a piece of paper in Baruch, Bar, whatever. It would just spell it out. So that was funny. So that's kind of the irony of how things change. I got into it. I started slowly but surely discovering Judaism, what it means to be Jewish, and the ethical perspective of things. And at that point, I got into more of like the mystical side. It was much more fun. I'm in the theme park industry where imagination is my main job. So imagination has always been a big thing of my life. It's always been something that I've really, geared towards. So I kind of feel a little bit embarrassed saying this, but my initial impressions of Judaism, my little Midrash says, were actually very like, I could see how a lot of the comic artists were inspired by, the Torah and Judaism. They say the K from Superman and stuff inspired Jack Kirby. And so I actually got really into it. I was like, wow, my little Midrash is such a cool concept. This is so cool. It's all I knew. I didn't know anything else what the Torah entailed. And so it was actually when I made my switch over to yeshiva, it was a yeshiva high school, a Jewish day school, that I discovered what Gemara is, and I freaked out. I was like, this is not what I signed up for. I was much more of a fan of the regular stuff. Uh, my first discoveries of, the reasoning, Arve Pesachim, it was in Masachet Pesachim. And the first time going back and forth, I was like, what the heck is this? This is not so fun. It seems boring. I was into, my little Midrash says, where did the jump go from that to this? So it was actually my brother who told me, like, look, you have the opportunity to be in a school that teaches you how to be a good person. The secular world was just very like dog eat dog type of person. So, I ran with it, and eventually, slowly but surely, I started getting adjusted, and I loved it, and I fell in love with it. And since that point, I was starting to get a little bit. I was in the yeshiva system for some time, and not to, God forbid, not to speak harshly or speak against anything. It's all great, but just me personally, I started getting a little bit, you know, felt superfluous of the concept of, Tvei Dinim, the two types of concept, that how to answer certain kashas, how do the Ashkenazim and the Bris style yeshiva, how do they deal with certain questions and answers. And I just wasn't, I felt kind of like I was running in a circle, not really getting anywhere, nothing that can apply to my knowledge. And I wanted to understand a little bit more. I was extremely sick at one point in my life. I had severe ulcerative colitis, and to the point where I had to go surgeries, but like I could not move. To the point that actually doctors, the interns, made a bet against my life that I was going to die. Thank God they didn't tell me this until later on. The bet was that I was supposed to die. Thank God it turns out I'm still here. Baruch Hashem. But it was at that point I was reading. I came across the book of the Maharal. It was like there's these like English history books, and there it was so weird because I always thought the Maharal is very known and it's Ashkenazi. So I always thought like I took it for granted that his approach to Torah could be a little bit different. And so it was one point where I read there, and he was actually at the start of the Pilpul movement, right? The Pilpul movement was how they intellectual acrobatics and how they approach things and stuff like that. And so I was just curious that there was one point where the Maharal walks into shul, and this story I remember it changed my life. And he walks into shul, and there he sees a guy giving. It was Rabbi Pollack was the head of the Brisker, not the Brisker. This is way before Brisker. I apologize. It was the head of the Pilpul movement because it was in to the Haskalah, to the Enlightenment and stuff. It was a reaction towards to show that there's like a lot of intellectualism going inside Judaism. So they wanted to show the complexities of the Gemara, how complex it is. So the Maharal, one time he said he saw a guy giving a pilpul shir, and he goes to him. He says, "Wow, you did something that David HaMelech could not do." And the guy's like, "What? What am I? I'm a nobody." He's like, "No, just hear me out. Hear me out. David HaMelech he created something that was never known and stayed forever. Sefer Tehillim. You created something that was never stated before and will never be stated again." Right? And that's like the whole concept. That was that point that I was like, oh my gosh. He kind of, like a light bulb went in my head at that point in time. I was sitting in this hospital bed reading it, and I was like, that's exactly how I feel. I feel anytime I'm going to these, the Shir Klali, the class that, it's continuously how to solve this theorot, the contradictions in the Rambam in one parak, and then 5 parakim later, and this halacha, and that, without having a grasp of anything. And I kind of felt like, in the end of the day, I cannot apply this knowledge. I don't get it. And at that point, when I read the story of the Maharal, I was like, oh my gosh, it clicked on me. There's got to be another way. And it got my curiosity, the same type of curiosity that got me into religion of, trying to live an ethical and just life, got me into now exploring, okay, now why am I studying this Torah? I'm not such a fan of that whole intellectual acrobatics at the Kasha. Nefesh Chaim says that, Talmud Torah is like, can I get everything in the sense, I know the Gemara says that, but in the sense of that, like it's higher than the level of Nevuah, and just trying to understand where am I coming from and where do I, fit into the system. And I even remember when I went back to yeshiva and I told one of our rabbis about the story of Maharal, he was like not a fan of it. I got like, chastised, but I was just like shocked. I was curious. Again, I lived in a bubble per se, so I wasn't so aware of that. So now going forward, I left that yeshiva and I'm trying to find now Sephardi yeshiva, trying to find, the Sephardic methodology of how they approach Gemara and to make it much more applicable, liba the hilchata, to go according to the halacha. At that point, I came across another Sephardic yeshiva, but it was only like Sephardic in name and tefillah only. So I remember again I was sick. I was not feeling so well. Thank God my sickness at this point was cured. And I actually had like a headache. And so it was a Ta'anit, and I asked one of the rabbis who was studying in Panovich for 40 years, and he was a Sephardi rabbi. I was like, could I take this pill? He's like, I'm not a posek. I don't know the halacha. And I was just like, what? Like that second I heard that answer, I was like, I'm out. I stayed 1 week in that place. I went over until I discovered Rabbi Eliyahu ben Chaim, who I fell in love with. It was the first time that like, I remember every single aspect of what he was saying, and it was very dialectic. So we would go back and forth. It was not just one person talking and nobody could speak back per se. It was very, very dialectical. We were going back and forth, speaking. Everybody was giving their opinions. He would give the halachot. He would break down, all the way from the Gemara to the Rishonim. He was not such a fan of the Achronim. He would only quote like the Vilna Gaon, but generally, even for halachat Sepharim, halachot Sefarim, he would quote Aruch HaShulchan, Rabbi and Rav Moshe Feinstein generally, but then he would say his own opinion and where he would stand. But for the Achronim, he wouldn't bring them in so much. Maybe the Rakaz every now and then. But that whole approach of just systemically bringing down the Gemara one thing at a time got me like, wow, thank God, this saved me, because now I feel like I have a cheshek, I have like a portion in this Torah. Well, before I was walking the walk, but I was not talking the talk. Oh no, I was talking the talk, I guess, but I was not walking the walk. Right? That's how the expression would go. I was not really into it so much. I was getting to a point of depression. I didn't belong, and like re-evaluating and re-seeing Torah for what it was. It just happened to be, it's funny, when I was sick that I was reading that book, that like it was that light bulb moment for me that I discovered that there's got to be something out there. And Baruch Hashem, I discovered it. And I'm still in that journey. I'm always still discovering. But it was that point in time that I realized that there's two aspects of Torah. There's an aspect of something that like, there's that, Rav Avram ben HaRambam, he talks about this in Sefer HaMaspik, that like that Rabbi, that path for everybody, and then there's also that individual path. However, what was scary to me is that my whole path and my whole understanding thing was dictated by a certain perspective. And that's where I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Where I would read a sefer like Chovat Lavavot, Shara Yichud, looking at the duties of the heart, the first gate. And to me, it would seem nothing contradictory than kind of what I was learning, as in like where he literally goes on saying like, don't waste your time on pilpul so much. He doesn't use the word pilpul, but on these theoretical cases that are extremely rare to happen. Don't waste your time on that. Focus on things, on making yourself a better person, right? He's like, that's much better. The one time a person came to in the Chovat Alabot and said he has a crazy question, he doesn't know how to answer, and he says this Chacham answered, Rabbeinu Bechaya is saying this Chacham answered, like, go focus on being a better person. Don't worry about these theoretical cases. Well, nowadays, it's like, all we do is focus on these crazy hypothetical cases. But again, when I was in yeshiva and I would read it, I was just so ingrained in the mentality that I never saw past it. And so reading a sefer a second time after this like enlightened perspective really opened my mind. Like, wow, I'm sure there's so many sefarim out there that if I read now from this open perspective, I'm sure I'm going to have a much better understanding. I'm going to try to really see it for what it is instead of my inherent biases. And that leads me now to getting to why I translated the sefer, and God willing, B'ezrat Hashem, have many more sefarim to come, because my goal is to be able to change things, change my mind, my perspective, instead of it being from what I want from the Chacham. I'll tell you like a story personal, that I was in a community that was it was Sephardi community, but very heavily influenced by Breslov Hasidut. And they were going in, they were saying, normally I never like to, I don't want to pick my bones, with anybody. But it was at this point in time where he's like, the Rambam was, I come from the Rambam, and I'm a big, and I believe in the Rambam, and the Rambam was the biggest Mekubal of all times. And there was nobody like the Rambam compared to the Kabbalah. And then I was like, okay. And this was the head rabbi of the community there. And I was like, I apologize. I just don't think that's fair. And he says, well, why not? And I said, well, because there's multiple reasons. That the fact that his son Rav Avram wrote a whole sefer Milchamot Hashem and trying to defend his father against the Kabbalists of the time, when they burnt the book, and then he got involved, and Radbaz was going around like asking to meet the teshuvot from him, like, trying to write, saying like, please meet with me, even though I study philosophy, I still love Judaism, I still love Torah, I still wake up in the morning to go pray, and they didn't want to have it. So it would just be ironic that, the Rambam came out with this revelation that he was a Mekubal, but to his own son, to his main Talmidim, that he never revealed this thing. So whenever going back, I don't want to get into the specifics of the story. What was one point was scary was that he was just like, but I identify with the Rambam. And then I said back to him, that's the problem. You love the Rambam only because you think he thinks like you. You cannot love him for how he thinks individually. And that's what the crux of it, that you only love somebody if they agree with your terms of being able to be loved by you, right? As in, they have to be a Mekubal, they have to be this, they have to have a long beard, they have to, whatever it is, however you imagine it, right? You have these dimyonot, these imaginations of an individual. However, really, 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 it's not our job to be able to make something fit to our perspective, but rather it's our job to discover the Chacham and see what they want to teach us from their perspective, right? And that's in the Rambam, the Mor Nevuchim, he actually quotes a philosopher, Themistius, and he says that the properties of certain things cannot, adapt themselves to our opinion, but rather our opinion must adapt to existing properties, right? So you have isogesis, which is the first thing, is that I have an inherent thing, and which is most Divrei Torah. Now I feel bad, but like I cannot hear any Devar Torah Bisman Hazeh. Most of them, Baruch Hashem, the Chabur is one of the only places that I can listen to where I know there is a concept that a preconceived notion that somebody wants to teach when they're approaching the Torah. So they're going to take out the text to fit their perspective. While the Rambam says the goal of us, of a Chacham, is really, and not just a Jew, really, I'm not a Chacham, so the goal of anybody is that our opinion must be adapted to existing, properties. Our opinion has to fit with what should be taught. So with what the Chacham is trying to communicate to us. And if we cannot do that, then we're failing the Chacham. And that exactly was the problem per se when I was in yeshiva and I was, kind of brainwashed per se, that anything I read, even if it was right in front of my face, that it was contradicting everything that I learned, like Rabbi Avigdor Miller, he says, like, don't read Shara Yichud, just skip over. He's a huge fan of Chovat Alavot, and he says, and again, I'm not speaking anything, I'm just saying, like, it was just like, oh, that's right, I had to skip over this part. It's no good. But at the end of the day, like, that part is that identity of who Rabbeinu Bechaya is, and a huge aspect that he's teaching about the pillars of Emunah there, that, why you can't have Emunah Pshuta is dangerous. It's dangerous because it's like a straw man. If one thing falls, it all falls over. These type of things are like, were in front of my eyes that I just didn't see because I only saw Rabbeinu Bechaya as who I want to see, a pilpul loving, theoretical and intellectual acrobatic loving chacham, rabbi, but at the end of the day, that's so far from the truth. Who he was completely different. So when I kind of broke that, shattered that mold, it just got me thinking, okay, I think my goal is to now start discovering these ancient chachamim, or not so ancient, but these ancient works throughout the different centuries and trying to see what they want to teach us themselves and see how do we relate to them and how can we take from them, and at the same time being intellectually honest. So I'm not here to say this is the right way or this is, that's never our place. However, there's no monopoly on the Torah, right? And so therefore there's something we can learn and there's some things that we can't, that we don't have to take from a certain chacham, right? But that's how I see, I took it upon myself to start translating these Sefarim. So I found Midrash David, was Rav David HaNagid. It was claimed to be by the son of Rav David HaNagid. And if anybody has any questions or anything, please, I don't want this to, I want this to be open conversation. So when I took upon myself to translate this Rav David HaNagid, it was from that basis that I want to discover. I feel like when I'm translating this Sefarim, I feel like I'm having a chavruta with him. I imagine the Chacham sitting in front of me, and any inherent bias that I have, I need to stop, right? So even to the extent of, like, I recognize that this is not the Rambam. We can't just think just because he is the grandson of the Rambam, that he is the Rambam. So which we're going to get into. I have to admit, I have my doubts as to whether Rav David HaNagid is the author of this for various reasons. But even, let's just say, if he is, it's very healthy for me to, and for us to understand that just because he's a son and the grandson, of such figures, doesn't mean that he is the same and he has to hold to the same thing. And it was kind of redeeming to myself because from Berdugo's, one of the working as Rav Peninin from Rabbi Raphael Berdugo on Yud Karimi as a whole teshuva. And there, I sometimes I feel like I have to agree with what he's saying. And I want to agree because he's my ancestor. I love him. Like I look up to him and, and everything like that. But however, there's some things where I'm just like, I respect it. I kind of disagree with it. So that's how we're going to get into. There's some places, the whole point of this class is to kind of, I guess we'll have 20, 30 minutes just going through some things of David says and how the Rambam would hold of it and if there would be an agreement or not. And then there could also be some time for question and answers if that's okay. So that's my introduction. Apologies for the long intro. So this is my first book that I took upon that I translated. Thank God. It was a nice my checklist. I'm very excited, very happy, very honored to partner with Feldheim and Mosaic on this Sefer. It really is an honor to be able to make this come alive. So I'm just going to go through certain things. Rav David HaNagid, he was from the 13th century. He was born in 1222. He lived into the 13th century. He died right at the 14th century in the 1300s. He became Nagid at 15 years old after Rabbeinu Avram ben HaRambam passed. He actually did lose a title. There was some, bad politics going on there. People were speaking out against him. He was then later on recognized by the government again and then reinstituted. We know he had some medical knowledge. I don't know how proficient he was in comparison to, let's just say, to his father or even, of course, his grandfather. But we know that he did practice medicine also himself. Now the question becomes of kind of what we know. We have seen the Kesef Mishnah quote Rav David HaNagid in some sometimes in the Kesef Mishnah we've seen Rabbi Yosef Karo quote Rav David HaNagid. we're not so far apart, maybe around 150 years per se, but it's kind of interesting to know at what point was there a change in the philosophy in terms of the Rambam going into the more mystical side of things. Rav David HaNagid, at least in this book, assuming that he's the author, we clearly see that there's heavy influence from Kabbalah. And I'll have some theories. I don't know, not to say that it's Zohar Kabbalah. It could be, the Bahir or Sefer Yetzirah, or specific Sefer Yetzirah that had that more Kabbalistic tone, and not like Rav Sadia Gans that was less of it. But anyways, we'll just get into it from that point. So I'm going to start off with tzedakah right away. We're going to go into sometimes where we see similarities and sometimes where we see some differences. And again, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask. We know the Rambam, he says very famously in the Laws of Charity, in the 10th parak, he talks about the 8 levels of tzedakah. The first one is very famous in terms of, he says that the highest level that somebody should give is that you teach them how to become independent, partner with them, make for themselves a means for them to become self-sustaining. There's a very famous parable, give a man a fish for the day, you feed him for the day. But if you teach him how to fish, then you feed him for a lifetime, right? So that is the ultimate level of achievement, that the truest high level of somebody giving tzedakah is making somebody be able to stand on their own feet, to make them independent. However, the second level is interesting, is that the second highest level is that where the giver does not know who he's giving to, and the person receiving does not know who the giver is, right? So and then other things going on, and then you have the next level is where the giver knows who he's giving to, or the giver does not know who he's giving to, but the poor person knows, or they both know, or it's done publicly, it's not done publicly. But what's interesting is that actually Rav David HaNagid, he kind of like takes it to a new level of extreme, and I actually haven't seen this anywhere before. There he says that charity, to the point that if somebody gives something to a poor person and it becomes a public matter of knowledge, he says that person loses all the reward in the giving of tzedakah. Why? He says because he takes it to say, because all that honor that you received, that is your reward. So you're not going to get any reward in the next world, but your honor is the reward that you have a legacy in this world per se, or that your name is known as a result of you being a kind-hearted person, which is kind of funny. So like according to Rav David, every single time says that, this shul has been donated by this, or this has been given by that, he's basically saying like, you lost your reward, or you didn't lose that is your reward. The fact that you had that public name is your reward, right? So that was just so interesting. The point, the Rambam does not bring that down. I haven't seen it unless, like, again, and from my knowledge, I've never seen the Rambam talk about such a point. But I think that was influenced by the Rambam in turn, because he does bring upon, making them independent, and then he just takes that level to a new extreme in terms of showing that by you giving tzedakah publicly and by you being publicly recognized, you've lost your reward in that portion. Fine. The next thing is going to go into work. Working is another thing. Very, very famous. We have very big chlokit bisman hazeh. What happened in Israel going on with the war, and it even spilled over to the whole thing again, the whole concept of kollel and not working for, working because, we are there at the arm and we're the head, or whatever the heck it is. There's some type of analogies that they try to, bring in very, very, very famously, is that even Rabbi Yitzhak Yosef, controversially, he quoted that Rambam in, at the end of Shemitah, talking about how everybody could be like a chelik, right? Of Levi. Any person who wants to be like Shevet Levi can be, and therefore he says that that's like a justifying proof as to why they're not going to, go to fight the war, because they're in the portion of Hashem, which is funny because Shevet Levi also went to go fight in the wars, so it just but whatever. Regardless, not going to get into that whole political aspect of that, but most people have a problem. There's a whole stira in the Rambam in Hilchot Talmud Torah, the third parak. The Rambam talks about that a person who takes any schar for tzedakah, who says, I'm not going to go become into tzedakah. I'm not going to go into work. I'm going to be studying Torah all day. I'll just sustain myself from tzedakah. The Rambam goes super harsh. He says, he has no reward in the next world. He's creating a keter for the Torah in this world. In reality, it's a spiritual endeavor. The Rambam, it's very famous. And then so Rav David actually also holds the same thing, but it's not so crazy to think. Why? Because he's actually just quoting, Pirkei Avot in the third parak. And there it says that kolam mekabel ala Torah marvin mimenu al malchut ve'al derech eretz, right? So a person who who he if he's accepting the Torah, and he doesn't, do Torah and derech eretz, it's bad. He's sinning. He's messing up here. So, but Rav David agrees with that. Some people try to justify that. No, et lasol Hashem. As a result of this is a time that we do for Hashem. So therefore, we have to, go around it, or Rav Moshe Feinstein has hold the Shuva on how, like, college is a different demand, or work back then is different nowadays. I kind of think, for me personally, I think it's a little bit of like, okay, I don't think so. But Rav David is clearly holding like his grandfather, saying that, like, no, like, work is extremely important. You have to do it. He straight up says that if you don't work, you'll come to sin. Goes along the lines of the Mishnah that's teaching. However, what is very interesting is that later on, though, I apologize. Later on, Rav David, he mentions the concept that what the problem that people have with the Rambam in Hilchot Shemitah Yovel is that it seems to be somewhat of a clear proof, and there is a clear proof later on that in Pirkei Avot from this Rabbi Yehunya, and it seems to be that a person who accepts a Torah, I quoted the wrong Pirkei Avot before. Allah Torah Marvin Mimenu al Malchut Ve'al Derech Eretz. A person who accepts a Torah. Oh my gosh, I completely quoted the wrong one. I apologize. I like typed everything in English, and it's transliterate here on my iPad because I'm traveling. That a person who accepts upon himself the Torah, he does not have to focus on Derech Eretz, right, and on Malchut, and so there seems to be a pretty clear claim to what's going on. But there, Rav David, he says that no, he just says that a person who does this, they actually their job will become easier for them. It will be easier for them to not focus on the things of Malchut and not focus on the things of Derech Eretz. Not to say that they'll be, how do I say, patur, exempt from the concept of working, but rather they won't have to focus on it, right? So to give like an analogy, if somebody who wants to make their chelik in Torah, while somebody would have to go and work extremely hard and do extremely tough things to try to make the money and cross the sea. Rav Avram and HaRambam talk about, like, it's ridiculous. You want to go travel and go crazy, put yourself in very dangerous situations, so that way you can, go and make some money. He says a person who has emunah in Hashem and who wants to focus on the Torah, that we will make it easier for them, right? So Rav David is actually like, he actually solves that somewhat of a stira in the Rambam, which is not really a stira, but just saying that, no, it's not that God forbid that you actually mamash become like Shevet Levi. No, you're good. Baruch Hashem is going to make it easier for you, that since you have emunah and you're putting your chelik with Hashem, therefore Hashem is going to make it easy for you to work on your parnasa, right? Your parnasa is going to be easier. You're going to have a simpler job. You're not going to have to worry about the money coming in. You're going to be okay, right? So that's what he seems to be happening. So I actually thought that was very interesting, and because there, from the pashut shot of the words of the Mishnah, it seems to be that like, oh, this is a clear exemption. No, that's not the case. Rather, here we see that that they're explaining those words to say that you're not patur from working. You cannot say like, okay, that's it. I'm a mach. I'm going to take money to study Torah, but rather, don't worry, your work is going to be easier. And I remember seeing the same things. Rabbeinu Bechaya ben Pakud and Poet Lavot and Shar Bitachon talks around the same lines, that your work will be easier. Don't have to put yourself across the sea. He mentions the same thing, like, don't have to go travel far. Why are you going to do that? By focusing on your emunah with Hashem and focusing on the simplicity of life, then you'll be able to, in learning Torah, then you'll be able to access, tap into that, that easy money making. Hashem will help, will get your back per se, But what was interesting, what Rav David HaNagid mentions that the Rambam definitely probably would not agree with, I cannot say for sure, I cannot speak for the Rambam, is that sharing in a reward. So if somebody is studying Torah, if by me supporting them or sustaining them, I'll be able to get a chelik in their reward, right? I know the Rashba, he goes, crazy at this, saying like that whole concept just doesn't make sense. How can it be? It works one way but doesn't work the other. If I do a sin, can I also split that reward? Like, could I say, hey, like half of this sin is for this person or something? Like it doesn't work like that in terms of like a person who does the sin themselves. While you maybe cause individuals, like you could be, that leaf ever, you can be that leaf ever, you could be that cause to causing somebody to sin. But the concept of me saying like I'm gonna break Shabbat, may half of my chelek of breaking go to my bro or something like that. Like it doesn't make any sense. Like, but for some reason for Torah, it seems to be on the positive side. It could be like I'm gonna learn some Torah, half the learning merit goes to blah blah blah. The Rashba says like the only time something like this works out is in for some legacy type of things by your grandchildren learning for you. It's not that you receive merit, but there's reward in that aspect because they're continuing your legacy that's as a result of you. But to say what Rav David is saying, I find it very, very hard to think that the Rambam. I've never seen anywhere in the Rambam myself where he mentions this type of sharing of zechut. There is a sharing. He has a Yisachar Zebulun. We know that he and his brother David had that relationship, but I find it very hard to think that the Rambam would say that as a result of sustaining somebody, you get half the merit in and learning in Torah. So that's my perspective. If anybody has any proof otherwise, I'll definitely be open to hearing it. The next thing is the Yetzer Hara, the whole concept of how does the Rambam deal with this Yetzer Hara versus how Rav David HaNagid. It's funny because in the Mishnah, Pirkei Avot, it says Shammai Omer me'ato, say harbeh, right? So it says Shammai says say a little and do a lot. So we take it as like an ethical perspective. It's like if you're gonna talk the talk, you got to walk the walk, right? And that's how we generally would understand this. But Rav David HaNagid, he says actually like from a kind of mystical perspective that no, you should actually be careful how you speak, because if you say something like if somebody were to say I want to study Torah, then it would actually invoke the evil inclination, your Yetzer Hara, and stop you from learning Torah. And so there's this type of weird, metaphysical, entity, this Yetzer Hara, and not just being like this some type of animalistic drive, right? That the Rambam would define it. Rav David HaNagid will look at it as in like this type of spiritual entity that's there to just stop you from doing your, God's work, or that's its purpose is to try to stop you per se, but it's not like some type of animalistic. It's like you could actually invoke it, per se, which is, we could look at it from a psychological perspective, like kind of like the Rambam, we'd see how he would do that, but the Rambam would certainly not say like, you're invoking your Yetzer Hara to do certain as a result of, speaking a certain way, or we know like that speaking can lead to an action, or that speaking can lead to thoughts that can cause you, to invoke, this animalistic side per se, or can trigger, it's probably like a better word. But certainly to think that like this Yetzer Hara has those capabilities, I find it almost impossible, not impossible, I would say impossible for the Rambam to agree to such a concept. Another fun thing is angels and demons. Rav David HaNagid on page 40 of this Midrash David, he talks about creating angels as a result of sin. We know very famously the Rambam in the Moreh in the second book, he talks about the concept of malachim and what they are, the Teilim Anitalim. He uses the Aristotelian term of the separate intellects, right? That what they are and how they're separate from everything else per se. And it's kind of like a metaphor for natural forces. I actually even saw in Derosha Taran something very interesting. There he kind of tried to understand the difference between what's the difference between rain mamash and a malach, right? So like we say that rains are kind of any physical entity per se is any force, gravity, rain, the sun, the rays of the sun, lights, all these things they have like that malach per se representing it. Even Rambam, it's a spiritual side of things. But how do we differentiate between mamash, the rain, or gravity, those forces per se, versus a malach? Like where does the malach fit in? So the Ran and Deroshat Ran, Rabbeinu Nisim of Gerona, he defines that, he says that Maaseh Bereshit is understanding the physical forces, and Maaseh Merkava is understanding the spiritual forces. So the malachim are those forces that drive the physical forces. So like while gravity is a physical force, there's a spiritual force that kind of acts as that intermediary between Hashem, the angel to the physical force to the action of like the physical realm of the world, of causing the plants to grow as a result of the rain falling, as a result of the malach of rain that came, from Hashem, or create Hashem set up the system. But that's how the Rambam, we know clearly defines what a malach is, besides Mishnah Torah, we give the 10 levels of melachim in the Torah. Generally, in the more nebuchim, it's kind of this type of, they're separate. They can never be physical. Everyone knows the machlok between the Rambam and Ramban as to, can a malach be physical? The Rambam is extremely adherently against it because of the concept of the second you take on a physical form, you're limiting yourself to physical problems, you're subjecting yourself to human emotions, to temporary, to change, to death, and all that thing. So therefore, he says that's how the name the separate intellect, showing as in how they're separate from anything within the human world. That's how that name came from. So Rambam really sticks to his guns on that aspect. But Rav David HaNagid shows that there can be angels that are created through your sin, which is a very Kabbalistic concept that that's even at the Hakdama to the Zohar, it talks about how with Lilith and creating these evil angels that came as a result, and all these things. Like, it's a very Kabbalistic concept of creating creating angels through sin, which the Rambam does not agree with, because again, if you see it as like gravity per se, like just like gravity is not like I cannot create gravity, it's just a force of nature per se. A malach is also a spiritual force of nature, right? It's that intermediary between the physical force, spiritual force. So that's how the Rambam would see it. So I definitely think the Rambam would not agree with his grandson on that one. Curses, almost done here. Curse is another aspect. Curse is what is the power of a curse, right? That's a very, very interesting question. Does a curse have actual, how do I say, is there actually causation when somebody curses somebody, right? The concept of ayin hara, like we know the whole thing with an ostrich egg. If you ever look at it in Bet Midrash, it's very, very interesting in terms of they used to think that because of the eye power, the ostrich cracks the egg through its eyes, and because there's some type of radiation that goes through, you'll always have this pseudoscience, some people out there trying to prove how this is like real science out there, no science is indicating they give ostriches eggs hatch like any other eggs per se. There's no power of the eye there, but some people try to show the Ben Ish Chai is like, had the Rambam see the study, he would have, switched his perspective. But it's funny because we know that no, actually, it would actually just prove his perspective more. But the Rambam's whole concept, the same thing applies to curses, ayin hara. Curses, is there any inherent power within me cursing somebody, right? So it's kind of like, when the Gemara says of cursing at a deaf person, right? That what is the power there? Is there actual power? Am I causing am I creating these malachim that are destroying, or am I causing, Hashem to be like, oh, look, this guy just cursed him, let me give him like a curse check, that he is now cursed, he's going to be subject to the things of curses, right? So Rav David HaNagid says that when somebody conquers the Yetzer Hara, then Hashem nullifies the curses that are upon him, right? The evil curses that are placed upon him. So the Rambam will not look at it that way, because the Rambam, how he sees it, it's a much more ethical book. In Hilchot Deot, when he talks about the laws of curses and swearing in the 7th parak, the Rambam doesn't talk about the implications and the inherent spiritual power to what it does, right? We know the Rambam just saying don't do it, it's not a good thing, the Torah says not to do it, and we know also ourselves what the Rambam he says when in Hilchot Avodas Zarah, when he talks about spiritual statements and spiritual activations, I guess you could call them, Oviaduni, these type of things of like, or doing certain incantations, looking at Hashu, do not we're believing in these bad type of things. He said it's all a bunch of nonsense. The constellations, believing in constellations, it's all nonsense. So we know the Rambam along those lines, he's not concerned about the power, that spiritual power when you curse somebody. He's rather concerned about the effect that it has on you. So the same thing when the Gemara says, if I curse a blind man, if I curse, when the Torah says, do not, I cannot curse a deaf person, then why? It's not for the deaf person, it's for you, that you're awakening something inside of you. That action itself is not good. When you're bringing out something that's nasty within you. So the only person who's going to suffer is you, right? So how the Rambam deals with that is much more in line than what Rav David HaNagid is saying, that there's actually like these spiritual powers that are going to start now affecting the person. I always say to like, my wife, why, and nowadays, especially for Sephardim, that they're very, occupied with the evil eye, Ayin Hara. It's funny how would they, sometimes somebody doesn't want to drive a Ferrari. Why? Because they're scared about Ayin Hara, right? They don't want them to lose their money. So it becomes like a circle. Like they're not really, they love the Ferrari. They're not trying to distance from the physical. They're trying to distance from the power that's going to cause them to lose the physical. So at the end of the day, it's like all physical. It's like they don't want to be physical because they're scared of Ayin Hara. The Ayin Hara will take their physicality away, and therefore therefore they won't drive the Ferrari, right? So it's like, it's all physical. At the end of the day, it's still a physical problem, right? At the end of the day, they want to keep their money, so they're just going to not show off their money. Well, the Rambam would say, no, it's not about awakening these evil powers. It's just don't be a show off. It's not nice to be a show off. From an ethical perspective, why do you have to be a show off? Don't worry about losing your money. Don't worry about these things. Like it's not about that as a result of me showing off, I'm going to get Ayin Hara. It's going to affect me and going to cause me to lose things. Rather, it's just not a nice thing to do. Like don't be a show off. Don't flaunt your wealth. Don't be, you have to be a nog. You have to be a humble person. That's one of the main aspects where he says that there is no extreme. There is no derech benoni. That being humble is extremely important. And by you showing off, or you're awakening something bad, or by you speaking bad, you're awakening a bad trait, a characteristic trait. Practice makes perfect. Aristotle always said that. It's just repetition is perfection. By you activating these emotions and the way of speech, it's gonna lead to one thing. It's gonna go rare. It's gonna cause something bad within another person. So that's what I think. The Rambam would definitely disagree with Rav David on that too. And then the last thing, which is actually I would like to bring up, is the concept of the neshama, the nefesh. We have the Rambam in Hilchot Yesodei Torah. He talks about two different concepts. He talks about, you have the nefesh and then you have the neshama, right? So nowadays we know, based off the Zohar comes in and says that the neshama is a aspect that it's unique to Jews. Only Jewish people have this. It's something that's chalak me'elokai. It's a portion of God, right? The Tanya goes on about it, and so there's a Ramban and Bereshit, right? When it comes to the breath of Hashem, but the Rambam holds it's extremely problematic. In the Moreh Nevuchim, when he talks about the concept of the nefesh, and apologize, let me just reiterate this, that the Rambam holds that the neshama is davar shetalu alav. It's something that's dependent upon the body, while the nefesh is tzalmo debuto, right? Is a thing that's unique. And what he goes into the first parak in the first chapter in the first book in the Moreh Nevuchim, that is what's unique to humans, right? It's what makes us unique in the sense that just like Hashem is unique and separate from everything else, so is the intellect of a human being makes him separate and distinct from everything else, right? So the nefesh is like that thing that's gonna even go higher than the body. It's higher than the neshama, because when the body dies, the Rambam says, so does the neshama. But the nefesh, the intellect that one acquires, like that ability to comprehend things, that's what stays on forever. While Rav David HaNagid actually agrees with the Rambam, which was interesting because, again, like any Zoharic influence or any Kabbalistic influence, generally is like one of the biggest core principles for them, to the extent of like the Zohar, showing that like that a non-Jew, even when they convert, and then again in the Hakdama to the Zohar, they'll see that they're never at the Jewish people are at the root of the tree of the Shekhinah per se, while like those who convert are always at the wings of the Shekhinah per se, but they're never at that same position because just what they have is so unique. The neshama that the Jewish person has is so unique. The Rav David HaNagid says that actually no, the souls were created, right? He says, I don't know what he's referring to, but he says that they were created under the Kisei HaKavod, right? That's the terminology he uses in his book. But I just found it very interesting because, again, that's like such a huge prerequisite. So many things of why, like, how many times do I hear stories of people saying like, oh, there's no such thing as a bad Jew because they have a piece of God within them, or to the extent that I remember, like, I was on Shabbaton and we had like different speakers and they're saying like, what about, like this guy Jeffrey Epstein and stuff like that. And, they're like, no, maybe he wasn't Jewish, or there's no such thing as a bad Jew, or what I said, like, son of Stan, the guy was Jewish. Like, no, he was adopted, but it turns out actually his biological parents were also Jewish too. So it turns out they just, it's very hard struggle for them to deal with that. No, the soul comes from God. There cannot, the first chapter of Tanya talks about that concept of there is no such thing as an inherently bad Jew, and there's no such thing as a not inherently, bad goy per se. That anything that a goy does is inherently for the bad. So the Rambam comes to, that show first off, know that the soul was created. Rabbi and HaNagid also agreed to them that the soul was a creation and not a piece of God. Of course, the reason, the implications of such statements from, the Zohar are extremely contradictory to the Rambam and also Rabbi and HaNagid. But it's so interesting to see, at some points, Rav David HaNagid goes like the Rambam. At some points, he doesn't. There's other times where, what was weird for me in this sefer is that he doesn't quote his father or his grandfather once. There's only two Chachamim I saw throughout the whole thing that he quotes, and that's Rabbeinu Bechaya ibn Bakuda and Rabbi Shlomo ibn Gabiral. Mifchar Pininim, which I actually saw the Haburas. I'm excited about getting that book that they're translating. I'm a big fan of Shlomo ibn Gabiral. So anyway, so those are only the two people. But however, he does quote a lot of things that, again, like with regard to tzedakah or how he interprets Ezehu Gibur, who's a strong person. He goes like his grandfather Rambam a lot, and he says like, no, it's not Gibur in strength. It's just a person who can kovetz et yitzaro. He can what's it called? Conquer his inclination, right? So he goes like those things like the Rambam. Maybe he didn't have a need to explicitly state them, and maybe that's why he felt, which is weird because, like Rav Avram in the Rambam, he quotes his father, in Sefer Masbik of the Hashem or Mamar Deroshot Chazal, which is part of Sefer Masbik, but we know that he quotes his father every now and then, while here he didn't. But I have two theories. My first one is that one, it could be that this was not written, it's Mizuyah, that in terms that it was written by Rav David and maybe another Rav David that had some Kabbalistic influence, or maybe that it was by, Rav David HaNagid, but maybe he wrote it when he was a bit younger per se, where he was, we know that, like, look, the Rambam himself wrote Perish HaMishnayot at 18 years old, I believe it was. So we know that there was Chachamim, the Baal HaMeor wrote it when he was also extremely young. So we know that there was Chachamim that were writing that maybe his perspective changed later on, or again, maybe he was influenced by the Zohar. We know that, I think there were, I'm not, again, like, maybe somebody knows better than me, but we know that there were times where Rambam's family later on that they got influenced by the Zohar, that they kind of went into that for that thought process, to some extent. I'm sure there were some that weren't and some that were, but again, like, it totally could be open. So that's my sefer. That was just some some things from it. You could buy it on Time or Mosaica Press. All the money that I make out of it goes straight to tzedakah. I don't take a penny. Baruch Hashem. I try to follow the Rambam. I try to work. So I work, and so anything helps. I hope people will enjoy it. It was something very emotional. I'm very happy to contribute and to be part of, bringing these ancient works, regardless of whether he's like the Rambam or not. There's definitely something for everybody to appreciate and to learn. And if anybody has any questions, be happy to answer them. I apologize. I was all over the place.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. If anyone has any questions, they can raise their hand, unmute.
My Bluetooth went out.
We can hear you.
Could I ask a question?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yes.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. I was absolutely fascinated with your talk. I'd really like to ask you a personal question about when you were on the early parts of your journey. Were people in the yeshiva, were people interested in your point of view? Or were they just trying to tell you what you ought to believe? I mean, I'm interested in how we...
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, it's such a weird thing, because in yeshiva you're taught how to question, but you're taught how to question within a certain frame, right? But anything beyond that frame, it was kind of like reprimanded, per se, or at least I got that. I got reprimanded a couple of times for asking such questions, about the authenticity of the Zohar. Like, I remember the first time when, like, I literally had a question, from when the first time that, to me, when I found out that the Zohar, could not be authentic. At this point, I'm 100%, like 99% convinced that it's not from Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. But at that point in time, like I was just so like shocked and wow, I was so shocked. And to hear that, when I went to my rabbi to ask from a genuine like
Yeah.
question, he like actually got angry at me, and I was just
Yeah.
like blown aback. I don't know why. And he actually came back to apologize to me, and, afterwards. But I was just like, I don't get it. I'm just asking a question.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like it's
Absolutely.
kind of I asked Rabbi Jonathan Sachs when I was in YU and REITs, and I asked him about the whole concept of like questioning, and he actually
Yeah.
told me something really profound, and he told me that if Baruch Spinoza was in the yeshiva of the Rambam, that maybe there would have been room for him, to be part, of Judaism instead of, he became extremely like anti-Judaism afterwards, per se,
Yeah. Yeah.
the founder of pantheism. So he's like, if the Rambam was there, the Rambam wouldn't have been like, get out of my yeshiva, which they did. That's exactly what happened to him in Amsterdam. When he was there, they're like, get out of my yeshiva. You're not welcome here. You can't ask those questions. We would like to think that in the Rambam yeshiva, he would have welcomed him with open arms, been so happy to meet him, right? He wrote
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Morning
Yeah.
Buching for Yehuda
Yeah.
Ibn Tibbon, his student. He was so happy, like he was so cherished to, what it meant to him that one person who's trying to seek the truth is better to him than the 10,000 people that are just, part of a system.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's fascinating. I've heard that's the same in Buddhism. Apparently, there's a guy called
Oh,
Stephen
yeah?
Baxter. Yeah, that you're allowed to argue, but the arguments are sort of dictated, so you can't argue outside the what you're allowed to argue. There's no really open
Exactly.
questioning. Yeah,
That makes
apparently.
sense. That makes
Yeah,
sense. I know I heard like one teaching from the Buddha, which is kind of like it has a lot to do, I think, with Hasidut per se, was that when they asked the Buddha, like, don't you want to find out where you come from or anything? And he said, it's kind of like if I got stabbed with a poisonous arrow, right? I don't care. I'm not trying to find out who the heck shot me. I just want to heal the wound right now.
yeah,
So
yeah,
he's
yeah,
saying like that's how. So like when we try to find into these like delve into metaphysics and ontology per se and trying to understand like the Buddha or these even Hasidut is looking at us like who cares? Just like we're here now and let's try to deal with it. While the Rambam we had this never ending that even the Ron Rabbeinu Nisimi like kind of like that we're like kind of like a dog cause for shalom lahavdil chasing its tail in terms that like
yeah.
we'll never understand Hashem but we still have to
No,
always be on that path and it
absolutely.
kind of
Yeah,
leads to contradicting this this very tumultuous life that we're always battling internally that in yeshiva that I kind of understand why I guess you're saying like Buddhism and even yeshiva wants to protect because they don't want kids to fall within that never ending sphere that
absolutely.
now I'm
Yeah,
part of.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Trying to one day, maybe one day we'll be able to find the truth, or
Yeah.
probably not. But we'll still search for it anyways. You still have to strive for it.
Yeah, it's. I think the expression is in endless mazes lost. You can get lost in
Yes,
endless mazes of intellectual discussion, which never takes you anywhere. Yeah, it can be
exactly,
pointless. Yeah,
exactly. But I guess it's like that's the paradox that we live. We have
yeah,
to. We, that's just the way it is, and it's harsh. It's harsh. Like sometimes, a lot of times, like I see the zealousness of a lot of Jewish people, and their simple understanding of things is kind of like Greek mythology, very similar in terms of like what they expect, from but and it's kind of like I get sad about it, but at the same time, it's like okay, look, they're serving. I don't understand God better than anybody else per se.
yeah,
I'm trying to, but and it's not my place to tell. But at least for myself, I know, you know, this is I cannot identify what is Hashem, but I can identify, I can identify Hashem by what he is not, and I can certainly tell that he's definitely not this, slot machine type of God that,
yeah, yeah.
do this and you'll invoke money, or something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's great. Yeah. Many thanks.
That's
Thank you.
that. Yeah, sure thing. Thank you. Okay. Ohad, I think are we good?
I think we're good. I shared the link to the book in the chat box if anyone is interested.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Chacham, thank you so much for being with us, for presenting, for sharing. It was very insightful. And have a good one, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I apologize, guys, for the music. If there's any music, I'm in New Jersey right now. I'm so sorry. Couldn't find
No,
an office
enjoy. It's
space.
been tremendous. Many, many thanks. Enjoyed it very
Sure
much.
thing. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for coming. Really means a lot. It's a real big
Cool.
honor. Real big zafut.
Thanks.
Looking forward to more stuff from the Chabura.
Looking forward to it. Yeah.